I'd like for you to imagine that it's 4 o'clock on a Wednesday. You're trying to wrap up a project before the end of the day. Your stomach growls, and then your mind jumps to your kids. You know they're going to be hungry when you pick them up from soccer practice at 5:30, so you do a quick inventory of what you have on hand to fix for dinner. And then your cell phone buzzes. It's your dad. He never calls you at work. You decide it must be important, so you answer it. Without even saying hello, he blurts out, "Your mother got lost on the way home from the grocery store today." Or perhaps it's your mom calling to say that your father's had a stroke or a heart attack. Or maybe he's fallen off of a ladder and broken his hip. What do you do? How do you respond when something happens and your parents now need your help? Well, I'm going to share 5 steps that can help you manage a crisis. Understand, none of this will be easy, but knowing where to start could make it a little less stressful. So step 1, show empathy and let them know that you care. Do not scold or shame them, saying things like, "Dad, why is she still driving? You should have taken her keys away months ago." Or, "Well, if he had just quit smoking and lost a little weight, he probably wouldn't have had the stroke." Or, "Why did you let him get up on a ladder in the first place?" Statements like that are not helpful. So rather than assigning blame for a situation that cannot be changed, take a deep breath and instead say things like, "I'm so sorry. I understand this is scary, but I'm here for you. We will figure this out together." That's step 1, show empathy. Step 2, assess the gravity and the urgency of the situation and decide what needs to be done first. If one of your parents has suffered a stroke, a heart attack, or a severe injury, and it appears that they are going to need a lot of help, or if it appears that the end of their life is imminent, there are several steps you will want to take quickly. First, put your emotions on hold and concentrate. Who needs to be informed, what needs to be done, and determine who can help. So let the people closest to you know what's happened and what they can do to assist you. For example, call your spouse, partner, or a friend and ask them to get the kids from soccer practice and pick up something for dinner. If you're going to be missing a lot of work, notify your supervisor immediately. Bring them up to date on current projects and recommend coworkers who can take over or even just help out. If you anticipate that you will need to be gone for a few weeks or even months, notify your HR department and ask to take leave under the Family Medical Leave Act. FMLA, FMLA for short, provides up to 12 weeks of annual job-protected leave. This is unpaid time off, but you do get to keep your group health benefits. Once you have that in order, then you can focus on helping your parents. If you need to fly, have someone book your airline tickets. Get a one-way ticket or a round-trip ticket that allows changes without a hefty penalty. If you're going to drive, see if someone would be willing to fill up your car with gas and pack some snacks and drinks for the road. If it doesn't make sense for you to take your kids, figure out who can take care of them in your absence. Check your wallet to ensure that you have your identification, your credit cards, and enough cash to cover incidentals. If you believe that they may die soon, pack clothing and shoes that will be appropriate for a funeral. Step 3, determine the kind of help they need. Once you get there, start with locating their end-of-life documents. Hopefully they have completed an advance directive, signed HIPAA waivers, and named you as one of their healthcare representatives. Without these documents in place, doctors may not be able to discuss your parents' condition, medical care, or allow you to make decisions about treatment, placement in long-term care, or end-of-life care, including life support and tube feeding. If they do have an advance directive, make sure that their doctor and the hospital has a copy on file. Now, let's say your dad breaks his hip. He'll most likely spend 3 nights in the hospital after surgery. After that, he'll need to go to a skilled nursing facility for rehab. The social worker at the hospital will tell you where beds are available, but they cannot recommend a particular facility. So it will be up to you to decide where to send him. Visiting facilities can be confusing and incredibly time-consuming. So you may want to Google this term, elder care placement services. And most elder care placement services get paid commission from the facilities, so what they do for you and your care receiver are generally free. Now, this can be a tremendous time saver. So once you are aware of the places that have beds, then make an appointment to take a tour. Then when you get there, observe the following. So, are people engaged in activities, or are they propped up in wheelchairs in front of a TV? Does it smell like urine when you walk down the hall? Is the room that your parent will be staying in, is it pleasant? Is the bed comfortable? Can they adjust the head and the feet? Does it have side rails and a good pillow? Does the facility have adequate staff? Who develops the treatment plan? Will they include you in making that plan? How often will your person get therapy? And are the physical and occupational therapists in-house, or are they contract employees? How dependable are they? How long does it usually take for someone to answer a call light? And how long do people in similar situations usually stay? And this is really, really important. How is the food? Mealtime may be the only thing that they have to look forward to. So ask to join the residents for a meal. If it isn't worth eating, find a different facility. Now, step 4, help them plan for the financial impact. If they need to go into a rehab or long-term care facility, you may need to help them understand and manage the financial consequences. If your parents don't have long-term care insurance and they have to go to long-term care, Medicare will pay 100% of their care for up to 20 days after the Part A deductible is met, providing they have spent 3 nights in the hospital. After that, there is a per-day copay for days 21 through 100. The 2023 copay is $200 a day. Then starting on day 101, people must pay 100% of their medical care unless they are on Medicaid. Now, if your parents are financially well off, or if they have long-term insurance, long-term care insurance, they're probably going to be fine. But if they have limited assets and income, I would encourage you to contact an elder law attorney and seek help to get them qualified for Medicaid. Now, if they're somewhere in the middle, I would also recommend engaging a good elder law attorney who can create a well spouse trust. Now, this will ensure that the cost of long-term care for one partner won't leave the other one financially destitute. And this is important because according to AARP, the average cost of 1 year in a private long-term care nursing home is $107,000. In-home care will cost approximately $51,000 for 40 hours of help a week, and in 1 year in a one-bedroom assisted living care facility averages $57,000. This obviously can wipe out a couple's nest egg pretty quickly, so getting help with their financial planning is really important. Now, if they can continue living at home, I strongly suggest that you get in touch with their local area agency on aging. The benefits vary by state, but most AAAs can provide your parents with services that might include paying for durable medical equipment like walkers and hospital beds. Some states fund home adaptations, including things like ramps and handrails, bathroom remodels, and even air conditioners. Other benefits can include help with advanced directives, free home delivered meals, and respite care. So you can call 1-800-677-1116 or Google eldercare.acl.gov and enter their zip code to find out what types of services and benefits are available in their area. And now step 5, accept your own limitations. When you become a caregiver for one of your parents, you will deal with a lot of relationship dynamics and a ton of administrative work. It isn't easy, and often it is not fair. If you have siblings, they may or may not show up to help. I believe most parents would not want their children to sacrifice their careers, their marriages, their children's needs, or their mental or physical health to take care of them. So please bear in mind that you will not be able to control the behavior of other people. You will not be able to turn the clock back or make them healthy again, and you will never be able to meet every need, fix every problem, or change the eventual outcome. But if you let them know that you will be there to listen, that you will do what you can to help them, and that you will love them through whatever lies ahead, it will make their load feel lighter and a lot less lonely, and it will make your journey as their caregiver a little more manageable. A few weeks after my Aunt Jean's 89th birthday, she said, "I've got some money from investments that I don't want to put back into the market, so I think I'd like to prepay my funeral expenses." Jean did not have any children, and 9 years earlier, she had moved from Florida to Oregon to be close to my family and me. Well, I was delighted that she was willing to pre-plan her funeral, so I contacted a local funeral home and made an appointment. A few days later, I picked Jean up and took her to the appointment. Now, poor Angela, the funeral home's representative, had no idea about the kind of experience she was about to have with my fiercely independent, intensely private, and incredibly tight Aunt Jean. So after completing a large stack of forms, each requiring Jean's signature and initial in numerous places, Angela turned on her iPad and she opened a page that featured floral arrangements, urns, guest registration booklets, funeral programs, and thank you notes. Well, when Jean saw the prices for the floral bouquets, she gasped and she shook her head and she said, "Well, that is just ridiculous. I do not need flowers." And then I said, "Well, Jean, I think flowers are nice. And, if you don't want to pay for them, why don't you pick out the kinds and the colors that you like and I'll take care of it." And then Jean said, "But then you'd have to pay for them." I nodded and I said, "Well, yes, unless you die in May or September, because that's when our roses are the prettiest. I could always take those." Well, grumbling, she selected a pretty pink and purple bouquet and made me promise that I would take them home with me after the funeral, because she would not want such an expensive bouquet to go to waste. Well, about 45 minutes into the process, Jean ran out of patience. She had answered all of the basic questions about birth date, social security number, mother and father's names, and her husband's name and the date of his death, and she decided against the viewing of the body and agreed to have the service at the church. She picked Amazing Grace for music and told me I could figure out the rest as long as I didn't choose songs that would have people dancing in the aisles. So then, clutching her purse close to her chest, she stood up and said, "I'm ready for lunch. Let's go." Angela shook her head and said, "Oh, we have a few more documents to complete." So Jean sat back down and scowled when Angela asked, "Jean, did you work outside the home?" "Yes, I worked for the federal government in Washington, D.C. for 30 years. Angela said, "What department?" Jean frowned and said, "Nobody needs to know that." Angela patiently explained, "Well, this is for the death certificate, and they'll want to know what department you were in." And Jean said, "Intelligence." "What branch?" Jean snapped, "Why do they need to know that?" "Well, they just do." "Army and Air Force." Angela said, "How fascinating. What did you do?" And Jean shot Angela a withering look, and I said, "Angela, you could torture, and she won't tell you. You just might as well move on." Well, not amused, Jean stomped her foot and said, "So how much longer is this going to take?" And Angela said, "Just a few more questions, then I'll work up the estimate." And Jean said, "I don't want an estimate. I want to write a check and get out of here." "Okay, I'll hurry as much as I can," Angela said. And then she picked up another form and patiently asked, "Jean, do you wear glasses?" And Jean said, "No, but I expect I might need them before I expire." "Do you wear hearing aids?" "I do not, but I suppose I could need them too before it's all over." "Wow, that's amazing," Angela said. "Do you wear dentures?" Jean said, Ditto. I don't need them yet either. Now, look, I didn't come with an expiration date, and I don't know what I'm going to need before I check out. So, why don't you just figure out what has to be taken off or taken out when the time comes? And that was it. I couldn't control myself any longer. I started laughing, and Jean gave me the evil eye and then turned to Angela and once again said, "How much longer is this going to take?" Angela said, "We're almost done." And Jean hissed, "It only took 15 minutes to plan Frank's funeral after he died, and I don't know why this is taking so long. If you don't hurry up, I may die of old age before we get out of here." It's been several years, but I still cannot believe what happened next. Angela pulled out a catalog and said, "Jean, sometimes people like to have a remembrance of someone who has died. How do you feel about jewelry?" Jean waved her hand dismissively and said, "Well, I've taken care of that in my will." Then Angela said, "Oh, I'm not talking about the jewelry you have now. Sometimes people like to keep the remains of a loved one close to them." Jean just was staring at Angela, just confounded. And Angela continued, "Sometimes people like to have a small portion of the ashes in a separate urn, and sometimes they like to have the remains incorporated into a piece of jewelry, like this locket." Jean jumped back like she'd seen a ghost, and she said, "No!" And then Angela said, "Then you don't want your ashes divided? You wouldn't want to give some to Elaine and some to each of her three brothers?" And Jean said, "Absolutely not." Finally, Angela says, "Jean, this is my last question. If there's any money left over, do you want that money to go to your estate or do you want it to go to Elaine?" And at first she said, "Well, back to my estate." And then after a short pause, she said, "No, I've changed my mind. Give it to Elaine." Well, I clapped my hands and said, "Wonderful. I'll gather up my brothers and we'll all go have a drink." And Jean said, "That's the best idea you've had all day. Let's go." I helped her out to the car. I got her walker loaded into the trunk and we headed to her favorite restaurant. Jean ordered a sirloin steak and a pint of Black Butte Porter beer. During lunch, I said, "Well, now that we've got that handled, why don't we talk about your 90th birthday party?" And Jean said, "Well, I don't care what you do, as long as you don't have coffee, cake, and balloons in the dining room. I hate those affairs. And besides that, I'm not old enough to have a party. We can talk about it when I'm 95. So the server set Jean's beer on the table at 11:58, and Jean never drank before noon. So her eyes darted from her beer to her watch for the next 2 minutes. And finally, at the stroke of noon, I toasted her with my Diet Coke and I said, "Here's to your good health and long life." And a year later, we celebrated Jean's 90th birthday with a family dinner. A month after that, Jean suddenly got very, very sick. I drove her to the hospital where the ER doctors diagnosed her with pneumonia and heart failure. My husband, my children, and I were all with her when she died a few days later. We were allowed to have some quiet family time with her after she passed. And then later, the hospital called the funeral home to come for her body, and we all went home feeling sad but peaceful. Jean's husband had served in Patton's army in World War II. She had had his ashes interred at the National Cemetery in Florida near their home. Well, they had met in Washington, D.C., and that's where they had enjoyed some of their happiest and most productive years. So I was able to arrange to have both urns containing their ashes transported to Arlington National Cemetery in D.C., where they were interred side by side. I think it's important to acknowledge that making plans for incapacity and death isn't fun. But I do believe that it is one of the most generous gifts a person can give to their family. Jean's behavior that day was crankier than usual, but I didn't mind. I knew that death was an uncomfortable topic for her. I'm just grateful that she recognized that planning and paying for her own funeral would take a huge responsibility off of my shoulders. And for that, I will always be grateful.